September 14th, 1981 was the day that changed everything for 12-year-old Tim Slaten and his 15-year-old brother, Jeff Slaten. In their Lakeland, Florida apartment, they discovered their mother, Linda Slaten, lifeless and brutalized in her own bedroom. She lay there, partly unclothed, with a wire hanger wrapped around her neck. The boys were left devastated, and the police, despite their best efforts, were unable to find the culprit for 4 long decades. But when the killer's true identity was finally revealed, it was a revelation that shook the entire Slaten family to the core. But before we dive into the video, if you're a fan of stories about the darker side of our universe, then do yourself a favor and smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads. Let's get into today's story. The story of Linda Patterson Slaten begins on March 8, 1950, with her birth into this world. At the tender age of 16, she found herself in the throes of motherhood, carrying her first son, Jeffrey Slaten. 3 years later, she gave birth to a second son, Timothy Slaten, and it seemed as though life was progressing as planned. Determined to create a sense of normalcy for her growing family, Linda convinced the father of her children, Frank Slaten, to marry her and embark on the journey of parenthood together. But alas, fate had other plans for this young mother. Despite her efforts to create a happy and loving household, Linda's dreams were soon shattered by the dark and turbulent forces that lurked beneath the surface of her seemingly perfect life. As Linda's marriage to Frank Slaten progressed, the true nature of her husband was revealed. Behind closed doors, he transformed into a vicious and abusive monster, subjecting Linda and her 2 boys to unspeakable horrors. Alcoholism and addiction plagued Frank, unleashing a violent fury within him that terrorized the family. Jeff and Tim's childhood memories are riddled with images of their father's drunken rage, his fists raining down upon them without mercy. Frank had no conscience when it came to his brutal attacks, and Linda was forced to endure the same torment as her young children. As the abuse persisted, Linda knew that something had to change. The thought of filing for divorce became a persistent thought in her mind as she struggled to protect herself and her boys from the danger that lurked within their own home. The year was 1974 when Linda Slaten finally found the courage to break free from the chains of her abusive marriage to Frank Slaten. After 9 tumultuous years of violence and terror, Linda made the brave decision to file for divorce, determined to protect herself and her 2 sons, Jeff and Tim. With her newfound freedom came the daunting challenge of starting over as a single mother, tasked with the responsibility of providing for her family on limited financial resources. But Linda was not one to be deterred by adversity. She embraced her role as a caring and devoted mother, tirelessly juggling the demands of work and household chores to ensure that her boys were well taken care of. For Linda Slaten and her 2 boys, life as a single mother presented numerous challenges, one of which was the lack of transportation. Without a car, the family relied on the kindness of others to take them to and from school and other activities. Despite these obstacles, Jeff and Tim remained determined to pursue their passions, particularly their love for football. However, without a ride to practice, it seemed as though their dreams of playing the sport they loved were out of reach. But fate intervened in the form of their coach, Coach Joe, a man with a heart of gold who recognized the potential in these 2 young boys. Without hesitation, Coach Joe stepped in, offering to pick up and drop off Jeff and Tim at or near their home, ensuring they could pursue their passion for football. Life was good for Linda and her 2 boys. In late October, Linda decided to invite her mother to move in with her. She believed that her mother's presence would help to bring a sense of order and calm to their chaotic household, making it a more comfortable and homey place to live. However, on the 4th of September, 1981, around 8:30 a.m., Judy arrived at Linda Slaten's apartment, excited to spend the day with her sister and her beloved nephews. But when she knocked on the door of Linda's room, there was no answer. Judy tried to shrug off the unease that was starting to build inside of her. Perhaps Linda was still sleeping, she thought to herself. But as she walked back outside, something caught her eye. The window in Linda's room was missing a sheet, and it was wide open. Judy's instincts kicked in, and she rushed back inside to check on her sister. She knocked again, harder this time, and when there was still no response, she pushed open the door. What she saw next was a sight that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Linda's lifeless body lay on the floor, a victim of a heinous crime. The lifeless body of Linda was discovered with a wire clothes hanger tightly wrapped around her neck. Her partially unclothed body was positioned across the bed, with her head resting on the floor. No indications of a physical struggle were observed, and their closet was found open. Otherwise, all the other items in the room appeared to be in their typical positions. In a short period of time, the Lakeland police, members of the press, and medical personnel arrived at the scene. Tim and Jeff were both roused from their sleep by police officers and instructed to vacate their residence, which had now become a crime scene. Upon arriving at the crime scene, Sergeant Edgar Pickett of the Lakeland Police Department initiated the investigation. During the early stages of the investigation, Sergeant Edgar discovered several prints in Linda's bedroom. Although the majority of the prints were identified as belonging to Linda, there was one print that did not match her own. Specifically, a palm print was discovered on the windowsill of Linda's bedroom, which, coincidentally, was also the same windowsill where a sheet was found missing. As the investigation unfolded, the palm print discovered on Linda's bedroom windowsill emerged as the most pivotal piece of evidence. This was a time before the advent of forensic DNA analysis, which meant that authorities were forced to resort to old-fashioned investigative methods. They meticulously scrutinized Linda's entire family tree in order to identify potential suspects. The first person of interest that emerged was none other than Frank Slaten, Linda's ex-husband. Given Frank's history of aggressive and abusive behavior, it came as no surprise that he was under suspicion in this case. The authorities immediately took him in for questioning. However, as they dug deeper into his alibi for the night of Linda's death, they discovered that he was actually in his home state of Alabama at the time of the crime. As investigators continued to dig deeper into Linda's murder, the focus shifted to her own son, Jeff Slaten. The events of September 3rd came under intense scrutiny, as it was revealed that Jeff had engaged in a heated argument with his mother on that fateful day. As the eldest son, Jeff had borne the weight of living in a household plagued by an abusive father and later a single mother. Although Jeff and his mother had their fair share of disagreements, they always managed to reconcile their differences. On the night of the murder, Jeff had made peace with his mother before retiring to bed. The authorities questioned Jeff at length about the incident and even subjected him to 2 polygraph tests. Astonishingly, Jeff passed both tests with flying colors, thereby clearing him of any involvement in the crime. As the investigation into Linda's murder reached a critical juncture, the spotlight fell on her boyfriend, a white male whose identity remains undisclosed. Linda, a single mother, had recently begun seeing this individual, and he had established a close bond with both her and her children. However, when the authorities conducted a thorough background check and polygraph tests, the boyfriend was ultimately cleared of any involvement in the crime. With time running out and the list of suspects dwindling, the investigators were left with no leads until September 1982, 1 year after Linda's death, when a tip came in that would change everything. As the investigation into Linda's tragic death entered its final stages, a new lead emerged in the form of a young man named Jimmy Ulmer. Rumors had circulated about his involvement in a similar crime, where he had attacked a 10-year-old girl by pulling her through her bedroom window. Upon further investigation, the police discovered that Jimmy had been convicted of a crime and was serving an 80-year sentence. Compounding the suspicion against him was the fact that at the time of Linda's murder, Jimmy was residing in the same apartment complex as her. Despite mounting evidence implicating Jimmy as the prime suspect, there was one major obstacle to the case. He had passed away during the course of the investigation. Without the ability to perform DNA analysis, the police were at a standstill until a breakthrough occurred. Jimmy's mother granted permission for a DNA test to be conducted on her son's remains, and hopes were high that this would finally provide the conclusive evidence needed to solve the case. But when the results came back, they yielded no match. The investigators had hit a dead end once again, leaving the family and investigators alike with more questions than answers. Despite the ongoing investigation by Lakeland detectives, Linda Slaten's death eventually became a cold case due to the lack of new evidence as years went by. The Slaten brothers were left to confront a new reality, where their mother had passed away and their grandparents were the only remaining family members. As the darkness of tragedy enveloped Tim's life, Coach Joe emerged as a ray of light, steadfastly ferrying him to and from practice to provide a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. Grateful for Joe's unwavering support, Tim profoundly displayed a photograph of his team on his bedroom wall, drawing strength and motivation from the happy memories it evoked. Through the years that followed, the brothers, who had tragically lost their mother, grew into men who cherished and loved their own families, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in face of adversity. As the years stretched into a bleak, desolate expanse, hope seemed to fade away for the Slaten family. In 1998, Sergeant Edgar Pickett stepped down from his position, and a new investigation team took up the mantle of unraveling the mystery of Linda's murder. Among them was Detective Brad Grice, who pored over the case evidence with a meticulous eye, unearthing a crucial piece that had lain dormant for years: unidentified DNA from the crime scene that had been collected in 1981. With bated breath, Detective Grice sent the evidence to the Major Crime Lab at Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLEs for short, and a year later, they achieved a breakthrough. A full DNA profile of the killer was developed, sparking a flicker of hope that justice would finally be served. But when Detective Grice collected DNA samples from the Slaten brothers and Frank, there was no match. The DNA was compared to other suspects, but there was nothing. No one matched the DNA profile. 17 long years had passed since Detective Brad Grice had first taken up the case of Linda Slaten's murder, pouring his heart and soul into unraveling the tangled web of clues and evidence. But in 2015, Detective Grice hung up his badge and handed the baton to two new detectives, Tammy Hathcock and Russell Hurley. For 3 years, Detective Tammy toiled away at the case, never giving up hope that justice would one day be served. And then, a glimmer of hope emerged. She learned that the FDLE had developed a new way of cross-referencing DNA. Taking a leap of faith, Tammy sent the DNA evidence back to the FDLE for a second analysis. What happened next left Tim and Jeff stunned to their core. The results of the test were unlike any they had seen before, revealing a startling and unexpected breakthrough that threatened to upend everything they thought they knew about their mother's murder. The night of September 3rd, 1981 was like any other for Jeff Slaten. He had just finished football practice and was being driven home by his coach, Joe. But when he entered the house, he found that there was nothing to eat. Feeling hungry, Jeff decided to head over to his grandparents' place. It wasn't until 9:30 p.m. Jeff reached back home only to find the house empty, still no Linda, and still no Tim. It wasn't until 11:30 that Linda and Tim finally arrived home. Tim went straight to bed, but Linda began to do her chores. As Jeff watched his mother do the dishes, he approached her and apologized for the argument they had earlier that day. The two made up, and Linda said goodnight before heading to a neighbor's house to play cards. It was at that exact moment, while Jeff was saying, "I love you, Mom, I'll see you tomorrow," that a dark and sinister presence was lurking in the shadows outside the house. A stranger with the deadly intent, waiting to strike at the perfect moment. The man had planned this for a long time and knew exactly what he wanted to do. He broke into Linda's bedroom through the window, removing the sheet and using the palm on the windowsill to boost himself in. He quickly made his way to the closet, where he hid inside, waiting for Linda to return home. As Linda slept peacefully, the man emerged from the closet and carried out his gruesome plan. He beat, sexually assaulted, and strangled Linda with a wire hanger from her own closet. Then he disappeared into the night, but remained close to the Slaten family for 4 decades. It wasn't until 40 years later that the identity of Linda's killer was finally revealed. Joseph Clinton Mills, also known as Coach Joe. When Tammy and Russell sent off the DNA to the FDLE for a second time, it ultimately landed on the desk of a renowned genetic genealogist named Cece Moore. Cece approached the case with a new strategy, using the latest advancements in DNA analysis and her expert knowledge in genealogy. Cece began her quest for justice by uploading the anonymous DNA from Linda Slaten's rape kit to a public genealogy website called GED Match. She spent countless hours meticulously piecing together a complex web of genetic information, tracing the killer's family tree back through generations. With each new lead, Cece dug deeper into records such as birth certificates, marriage licenses, obituaries, and even social media profiles to fill in the branches of the family tree with names. Cece's relentless pursuit of the truth eventually led to a stunning revelation. The killer's DNA matched that of Joseph Clinton Mills. It was a breakthrough that would finally bring justice for Linda and closure for her family after 40 years of searching for answers. The investigation took a new turn as detectives delved deeper into Joseph Clinton Mills' criminal history. They discovered that Mills had previously committed grand theft by forging a will, and although he had not been charged for it, police were able to obtain his palm and fingerprints. When the palm print found on Linda's windowsill matched Mills's palm print, detectives knew they were on the right track. However, to make absolutely certain, they needed to compare Mills's DNA to the DNA found at the crime scene. With no direct way of obtaining his DNA, the detectives resorted to an unconventional method. They secretly searched through Mills's garbage bags, hoping to find something that could have his DNA. Their persistence paid off when they found a piece of medical adhesive tape that had been used by Mills. This, along with other items found in the trash, was also sent to the crime lab for testing. Finally, the results came back and the DNA on the tape was a match for the DNA found at the scene of Linda's murder, leaving no doubt in the detectives' mind that Mills was the killer. In a gripping turn of events, the case that had remained unsolved for over 4 decades finally saw justice in December 2019. Detectives were able to arrest Joseph Mills, the man responsible for the heinous crime of killing Linda Slaten. During his interrogation, Mills pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and sexual battery. However, the family of Linda Slaten had not yet found closure. At Mills' sentencing hearing, members of Linda's family stood up and bravely confronted Mills. They demanded to know why he had killed her, leaving the courtroom in an emotional upheaval.
One question.
Why? I just want to know why, Joe. Why'd you take my mama from me? I love my mama. We was happy.
The judge sentenced Mills to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While the Slaten brothers find some comfort in the fact that Mills will never taste freedom again, they are consumed with anger that he was able to live freely for so many years while they suffered the loss of their mother. For Tim, it was practically jarring, as he had held Mills in high regard and even kept a picture of him on his bedroom wall. In the aftermath of Linda's murder, Mills would continue to take Tim to football practice and occasionally inquire about the progress of the investigation, all while surreptitiously monitoring the police's efforts to bring him to justice. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure you hit that subscribe button. We post new stories every week covering the darker side of our universe. If you want to see more videos like this, then I highly recommend that you click the video now on screen. That video has been selected specifically for you. Enjoy.